Revo Rundown Episode 6. Today we'll be talking about RPM Aarms, hot racing axle carriers, steel hollow balls, bushings and bearings, Diff Shims, and GPM Shocks. I'm switching over to my new Mini E Revo. I felt it was cheaper in the long run to just buy a completely new car instead of buying replacement parts over time. In Episode 4, I talked about this. I estimated it would cost almost $1,000 to buy all new stock parts to build a complete Mini E Revo. A new Mini E Revo fully assembled and ready to rock is only $260 to $300. Of course, there are some things I wanted to upgrade right away. In this episode, I'll show you these upgrades and talk a bit about them. RPM Aarms. The stock A-arms on this car, they'll be one of the first things to break. I recommend these RPM A-arms. These things are tough. The plastic is pretty flexible and seems almost impossible to break, unless you're doing some really crazy stuff to them. For this reason, I think they're the best for bashing and running dirt tracks. On big impacts, they just flex and snap back into shape. I'm sure aluminum A-arms are great if you never crash, but if you bend one, it's done. You can only straighten them out a few times before they become too brittle. Hot racing axle carriers. On my old Revo, I use the RPM axle carriers. I highly recommend them. The only issue I had with them is sometimes on really hard crashes, the pivot balls would pop out of the axle carrier. This only happened about 3 times. Not a big deal. You can just pop them back in and keep running. I decided to check out these hot racing aluminum axle carriers. They look really nice and feel pretty sturdy. Installation was smooth and they seem to function well. I'll let you know how they hold up in a future episode. Steel hollow balls. The stock plastic hollow balls wear out really fast. This makes your suspension and steering sloppy over time. Replace them with steel hollow balls. These will last a long time and help keep suspension and steering tighter. The steel ball itself won't really wear down at all, however, it will wear down the plastic around it very slowly. The only downside I've found to the steel hollow balls, the screw that's going through the hollow ball itself will wear down and not be snug anymore. This will eventually cause suspension and steering slop. On the upside, it's pretty easy to just swap out the old worn down screw for a fresh one once in a while. Bushings and bearings. Swap out bushings for bearings. This is an easy upgrade and makes things tighter and smoother. In your suspension rocker arms and your steering servo, there are a few plastic bushings. Get yourself a bearing kit made for your RC and swap out those plastic bushings with metal bearings. Your steering and suspension will stay nice and smooth for a long time. Heatsink. I like the look of the heatsink, so I popped one on the new Revo. It seems to help the motor stay a bit cooler, so I figured why not. Diff Shims. If you shim your diffs, your gears will thank you and last a lot longer. The shims basically just help keep pressure on the ring gear side of the differential so the pinion gear doesn't slip and wear out the teeth. I put 1 shim in the front and 2 shims in the rear diff because it takes a bit more abuse. GPM Shocks. In Episode 5, I got GPM aluminum shocks and set them up. I installed them on my old Revo and said I would let everyone know how they perform. They come with 3 sets of springs that all seem pretty stiff. They didn't specify spring rates, so I started with the springs that seemed the softest. I went with the gold ones, which feel stiffer than the black Traxxas springs. I put about half 90 weight shock oil and half 60K diff fluid in each shock and set the spring retainer just barely tightened down. The GPM shocks are slightly larger than stock and a little harder to install, but they do fit. GPM shock review? They're pretty nice. No more rear end sag, nice rebound with the super thick fluid, and way less rear end slap on hard landings. On the track, the Revo lands way smoother and even takes off jumps smoother. So far, they don't leak a whole lot and they seem pretty sturdy. I would say for around $15 a pair, the GPM shocks are fantastic. That's it for this episode. Please hit the subscribe button and check out my channel for more fun videos.